Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay. Welcome to the Battle for Azeroth beta and the first pass look at the Frost Death Knight. This is the final first pass spec. And unfortunately, after all of this time, I gave extra time and waited to see if the patch would go live. Frost has not a ton of changes. We still looked over things for over 2 hours. There are still quite a number of things I will go through in this video that we did find, but for a big old slappy, oh my goodness, like Home Alone moment with the talent tree rework or anything major, don't expect that in this video because it doesn't exist yet. There is a blue post that did say that Frost and Unholy still had changes on the horizon, and I was like, okay, the next build? Sure. And Unholy had plenty, as you may have watched the Unholy video by now. But Frost, not yet. As of recording this video, nothing. There may be a comment pinned down below with some key notes about when the Frost changes happen. But again, still, we need to get a baseline. So if you want to check out the entire VOD of the testing, of course, you can find that right here on this channel or, of course, over on Twitch. Link to my Twitch stream in the description box, as well as my socials. And if it's your first time here on the channel, hello, I talk about World of Warcraft a lot and do all this spec testing. Second passes on the horizon. If you want to watch those, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on when those happen. Check out my channel guide, of course, if you would like to see all of the organized format, or if you want two-handed DKs to come back. It won't help, but it keeps me doing this. You can go buy a Fabelita shirt and little Arthas and Syndragosa. It's really cute. It's also linked down below. It's Arthas. I gotta plug my merch because, you know, hashtag sellout mode. We get some hashtag sellout modes in chat. All right. Frost DK. Not a whole lot specifically for it. I'll go over the talent tree right now. Exact same thing you're looking at online. Exact same thing. So there won't be a lot of gameplay in this, most likely. I'll show off a few different little bits and pieces here and there, but the exact same thing except one talent, which you may have already seen there, but more on that in a moment. So, baseline updates for the Death Knight overall is you have a runic power cost again on your combat res. Ray's ally has a runic power cost now. Still instant cast, but gotta have that runic power to res someone. So druids have a 100% 20% res with a cast time, and it's free. And then warlocks have the longest cast time, still a 60-20 res, but theirs can be put out, you know, before combat or whatnot. So there's three different little, you know, parallels or non-parallels between all three combat reses now. They're not all instant and they cost nothing, and then warlocks are the ones that have a cast time. So they're all a little different now. Reap magic is also new. This is a 10-second cooldown, 40-yard range purge that will remove a beneficial magic effect from the target. Removes it, does not grant the Death Knight the ability or the buff or the debuff or whatever. Just gives you 25 runic power if done properly. It's a little bit more utility in your toolkit there. There's a small buff to Death Strike where it's a 30% damage snapshot window up from a 20% on live. So a little bit more of that utility to keep yourself alive, I guess, because right now on live it's 20% of damage taken, which is either really good sometimes or really awful. So they bumped that up a little bit. So is the 10% max health, of course. So just amplifying your base kit a little bit. Speaking of amplifying the base kit, I talked about Control Undead in the Blood DK and Frost DK videos, but today we actually tested. This is a tooltip error. You can still totally mind control or control undead things that are above level 70. So it says level 70 for some reason, probably just an indexing problem in the build right now. So you still can control undead when it matters, but we'll see how that goes forward. Additionally, you also have dual wielding is confirmed. Unfortunately, no two-handed Frost like Arthas in this picture on my shirt, right? So, because Frost Strike requires one-handed melee, as well as Obliterate requires one-handed melee. However, Frost Scythe doesn't, but you can't spend your runic power without using dual wielding. So, on that dual wield side of things, though, Rune Forging had a slight update to the Rune of Razor Ice. So this is the be your main hand rune you put on for the Frost Death Knight, where it causes additional extra weapon damage as frost damage, and then it makes enemies vulnerable to your frost attacks by 3% up to 5 stacks. However, it says 21% right now. If I take off strength and versatility gear, oh, it goes down? How about versatility gear? Keep going down. How about mastery gear too? So it seems that Rune of Razor Ice is scaling with the new attack, power, weapon damage formula, most likely, and then it's being scaled by mastery, more importantly, and versatility. Your mastery, of course, is still your frost damage is increased, so now your Rune of Razor Ice does scale with that. So not only do you get weapon damage scaling, you get mastery damage scaling on this little extra bit of damage. Not a huge change, but it's nice. It's a nice, small little update, because on live right now, it's just a flat amount plus the artifact trait, so little thing to look forward to. So the artifact trait Rune Frost has also been rolled in baseline with your runic empowerment. So you keep the 1.8% chance per runic power spent to gain a rune, up from the 1.5. Now this, of course, with Frost Strike means a 45% chance per Frost Strike to get a rune back. Just under under 50%, right? Where for Unholy, they had a Death Coil change where now Death Coil is 40 runic power. So there was a parity there between Frost Strike and Death Coil where they both give you a 45% chance to activate your rune passive, either Runic Empowerment or Runic Corruption. So Frost keeps that, but Unholy lost it. But Unholy also has other spenders for runic power now, so I'm going to imagine you will also, with Frost, have more spenders for runic power that aren't just Breath of Sindragosa. So we'll have to wait and see, of course, when that does happen. We talked a lot about Breath of Cindy today on the live stream, and I have something to show about Breath of Cindy because it actually got nerfed. Awkwardly enough, we'll go over that later too. So your mastery wording has been changed now to say your frost damage abilities. This will now mean that any exterior buffs or procs or mainly trinkets that used to deal frost damage, whatever those ones were, will no longer scale with your mastery. Same thing with Unholy. It's your shadow damage abilities. They have been doing this a lot, all the masteries, to make them not scale outwardly, only inward on your character itself, to make a lot of trinket choices rather flat, possibly boring, but at least not scaling out of control awkwardly in that reason. So that's one thing. Remorseless Winter's snare has been reduced to a 20% snare, down from 50%. And Pillar of Frost and Empower Rune Weapon are on the global cooldown, which may or may not be a big deal depending on the other changes you have in the future. Additionally, you heard that right there. Death's Advance is back and as a baseline movement tool. You saw that Wraithwalk is now talented. So Death's Advance is you cannot be slowed below 70% of your normal movement speed passively, and then activated for 8 seconds every 45 if you need it. It's a 30% sprint, where you cannot be slowed below 100% during that. And you're immune to forced movement effects and knockbacks because of Death's Advance coming into play. Your Pillar of Frost now, which is somewhere, doesn't have any of those synergies anymore. So POF is just for your main DPS cooldown. And this does tie me over to Winter is coming, which is enemies struck 5 times by Remorseless Winter are rooted in place for 8 seconds now. No longer is it a stun where you need to activate Pillar of Frost with Remorseless Winter now. It is a root. So it's a slight buff, kind of. It decouples that requirement, but obviously it's not a stun anymore, right? But it is still an AoE root that is very, very, very easy to accomplish, especially with Gathering Storm, at least in this current incarnation, still extending the duration, because you can do a lot of shenanigans, like freezing a lot of targets. So you can freeze and root a whole bunch of targets over here first, and then walk over here, and then freeze a whole bunch of targets over here if I get any rune power. Runes, give me. Yeah. So I walked from one rooted pack to another rooted pack because of the extended duration in Gathering Storm and how Winter is Coming works. So, which is a lot of rooting, because it's a 20-second cooldown. on Remorseless. And every time you have Remorseless now, with Winter is coming, you will root things. And it keeps refreshing. If you keep hitting them with more stacks, it'll keep putting the root on them. Of course, damage can break this, but it's going to be reapplied over and over again. So that's a nice little change with decoupling that whole thing from Pillar of Frost. Other than that, everything else baseline remains the same. So IBF and Grip and Dark Command, Chains of Ice, AMS, all that stuff is the same as it is on live. And your talents are all the same as they are on live as well. So nothing has seen any changes right now. So you still have pretty blah talents. Avalanche, Ice Cap is still fine. Freezing Fog, incredibly boring. Icy Talons got nerfed from 12% down to 5%. This may be of things to come to rebalance out this top tier. Runic Attenuation still exists. Oh gosh, anyone else just yawned? Sorry. Whew. That talent, though. The Frost rotation is, obviously, it works, right? Frost is and can be very GCD locked. Just because of how Rhyme and Killing Machine work together. Just hitting buttons at this point. So that is still very much a thing. So a lot of these weird passive talents on Frost are just because it sort of accentuates parts of what the spec already does. The only issue is that it's also very boring that you don't have any talents that really are that interactive until much later on in your talent tier. And that's just a problem. Which hopefully, again, with your new talents that are happening soon, you'll have that as an option. The only thing that's changed, of course, was Wraithwalk, to go back on the movement thing. You lost that stupid extra AMS talent, at least for now, that shielding. But Wraithwalk is a 1-minute cooldown, and you cannot stack these. However, you can, of course, train them together. So it's a 1-minute cooldown. It lasts for 4 seconds, up from 3. It's a 70% movement speed increase, where you remove all roots from yourself when you activate it. And while it's active, you cannot be slowed below 170% movement speed. So you can Wraithwalk. Of course, any action you take breaks it, as it normally does. And then, of course, you can Death's Advance. Death's Advance lasts, of course, no, there's no breaking it, because it's just a regular movement speed in that regard. So a little bit more mobile if you need to be more mobile. You still have Permafrost down here, at least as it currently stands, which is like the Patchwork talent. And then you have the Inexorable Assault, which is the stacks of auto attack damage when you're in combat but 8 yards away from something that just stacks on your autos and gives you the... It's fine. It's the, you don't need more mobility, but you need to walk out of things sometimes, like, Mythic Argus or whatever, you're walking out with the debuff and you walk back in, so you get the extra auto attack damage, because it's that you're not a very mobile class, but here's like an anti-bonus mobility tool. I don't know. Still kind of strange, but we'll see again how it gets reworked. Frozen Pulse is still here, sadly. It's super boring. Hungering Rune Weapon is on the global cooldown because your actual empowered Rune Weapon is, and the resource pooling is a problem because you cannot spend everything. You can spend the runes, but then you can't spend the runic power, and if you spend the runic power, you can't spend the runes. So that's a problem. Obliteration still is here, still works with Frost Scythe as it does on live. It feels very good. Obliteration is on the GCD, however, it lasts 12 seconds now instead of the 10. So using it in conjunction with Pillar of Frost, for example, you do get a bit of that delay, but you have the extra duration. But that, of course, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out with any talent builds. One more. Oh, I missed it. Oh, I got it. Never mind. There we go. But again, see, even Obliteration, you don't want to ever use the other abilities. I should have, of course, cast the Howling Blast to begin with to get my Frost Fever ticking. During testing today, if you keep up with the other specs, bleeds and poisons, so Druid bleeds and Rogue poisons all scale with haste now. Unholy DK and Frost DK still have no scaling on their Frost Fever or your Plague, nothing like that, or your freaking Blood one as well, right? The Blood Plague. None of it scales with haste still yet. Oh, this is a talent that makes it scale, right? Like Blood DK has a talent. But a few different tests we did today, we saw partial ticks for some reason on Frost Fever, which means it has haste scaling. So maybe maybe Frost Fever and Virulent Plague and Blood Plague may eventually scale with haste. Possibly. Maybe not Blood Plague, because that, of course, heals. But I'll have to wait and see. Because I don't know why every other dot in the game now scales with haste except the DK dots. Which is just kind of strange. Alright. But Breath of Cindy time to talk about. Because again, everything else is still the same. Breath of Cindy has always been way too powerful. It was when Hungering Rune Weapon was at a different talent tier. Right, so this was changed a while ago. Hungering Rune Weapon was moved down here during the little 7.3, I think, shake-up on your talents. But if you've ever played with Breath of Cindergosa, it's either way too strong and it stays up for like a minute, or it's way too weak, doesn't stay up long enough, you never take it. And to make more compounding awkwardness with Breath of Cindy, nothing has changed on the tooltip or the functionality of the spell. What has changed, however, is the scaling on its damage. So your main target always takes 100% damage. But every +1, +2, or +3 targets now heavily diminishes the damage. At 2 targets, so your main target +1, it's roughly 52% damage. And then when you add 2 more targets, it goes to 18% damage. At 3, it goes to 13%. These are all just kind of rough numbers based on the math we see here right now on alpha. Or beta, rather, sorry. Well, same thing, hasn't changed since alpha either. So, 2 target Breath of Cindy is fine, but 3 target is just awful. So you'll see the damage numbers here. Build up a whole bunch of runic power, and then I'll show you. It's very strange that it's getting like forcibly gutted as an AoE choice, which basically means you're just gonna take Obliteration and line it up with Frost Scythes, because you can just Frost Strike, Frost Scythe, Frost Strike, Frost Scythe, Frost Strike, Frost Scythe, right, to proc Killing Machine and just spam Frost Scythe, right? So Breath of Cindy is but it's not as good as Obliteration. It's a longer cooldown for less damage, period. So, but you'll see here in the combat log, let me turn to the side. Let my Frost Fever tick off here so you don't have anything else that's confusing you in the combat log here. And you'll see, as I turn towards the target, there's the 4 target. Let me try to get a 2 target in here. That's 2 target right there. So this was main target +2. This was main target +3. And then I had this was main target and +1. I had a crit, right? It's just double damage, basically. So at 2 targets, it seems fine. But once you go to the +3 or you know, +2 or +3, it's just really gutted. And of course, it'll scale sort of exponentially in that regard, or at least on a flat plane where you have more targets, you'll still be hitting more targets. But if you're hitting 9+ targets for like less than 100 damage, because it'll just scale so far down, it just seems like it's super, super weird. My thought process on this, and it's the point of this video, and of course it's a shorter one, because something to go over here. What are your thoughts for Frost DK? What are you hoping for? Leave me comments down below in the description box here, or hit me up on Twitter, because in the second pass, we'll probably push DK sort of the middle of the second pass loop. And in that time, your feedback will be helpful, because I can write up things to Blizzard and send them in directly to see how it changes up. Now, of course, you're looking at the talent build now and what the Frost DK may or may not need, what your thoughts are. But let me know. I think, and we talked about Breath of Cindy a lot on the VOD today. You can watch it, of course, if you'd like to go through the whole thing. Breath of Cindy should be a more defining spec ability, kind of like I-Beam for the Havoc Demon Hunter, where it should be like a 56 or 57 talent. Probably a 56. These are all sort of probably supposed to be rotational. Icy Talons or Shattering Strikes have rotational light elements. Runic Attenuation is nothing. So Breath of Cindy should have sort of a 30 or 45 second cooldown where it costs a ton of runic power, maybe has a base amount of duration, right? So it has like this AoE-ish single target nuke. It could do more damage to the main target and less damage to the off targets like the new I-Beam does, but almost sort of have this like builder spender baseline rotation that cooldown or no cooldown or whatever. It needs to be something that's a little more impactful. It's way too iconic of a spell to be so relegated to this playstyle where you build to it. You can't spend Frost Strikes, right? You have to build to Breath of Cindy, and then you activate it, and then you just kind of, all you can do is just hit abilities that cost runes. And it's good if it works out for long enough and you get some good rhyme procs in it, but eventually it just falls off and it doesn't ever last long enough to feel... It needs something. It needs to be a core rotational ability where you build to it, you spend it like a Rampage, like a Shadow Priest kind of a thing, and be a talented choice if the fight is worth that style of encounter. Versus Obliteration's obvious AoE and single target burst capability, Breath should be more rotational feeling. Right? And another way for you to spend runic power, because now Unholy has Epidemic, which is an AoE spender, and Breath is an AoE spender, but on a 2-minute cooldown. And then after that, you're back to Frost Striking to spend. That's it. Which just seems like not enough. You need something else. So let me know in the comments down below what you think, what your thoughts are on the Frost DK. By default, it still works. This has like 4-ish dead talents, and Breath of Cindy is still really weird. But again, subscribe to the new YouTube channel right here if you want to keep up to date with all of the testing yet to come, all the second passes, which will have more of a scripted format. Thank you all for joining me on this journey for the first passes here, as we've sort of iterated upon and done a lot of discussion about all of these specs going from Legion to Battle for Azeroth. Check out the live stream or my socials, link down below. Or if you want to support what I do here more directly and get yourself an awesome Arthas and Cindy shirt, it's right there. It's adorable. I'm plugging the crap out of it just because it's, you know, I never really plug my stuff and my manager tells me to hawk my wares more often. So there you go. You've been hawked at. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll see you all in the second pass coverage and some discussion videos on the horizon. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in more Battle for Azeroth beta coverage very soon.